entity performing the launch status check at this time. All systems verify ready, resume count, and go for launch. OTC, go. TBC, TBC, go. TTC, IUS Tidus is go. LPS, LPS is go. Houston flight. Houston flight is go. Pilot, pilots go. STM, STM go. Safety console. Safety's go. SPE, SPE go. CDR, Discovery is go. LRD, LRD's go. And SRO. SRO's go. You have final clear to launch. Copy.
Hi, this is Jessica Snider with Tech Lab Camp and Capital Area Council BSA. So we are here joining you, and we have a special guest, Steven Smith, joining us today to talk about the Artemis mission. Steven is an education specialist working with NASA's Educator Professional Development Collaboration at Johnson Space Center in Houston. He's lead on the Commercial Crew Next Generation STEM pilot, currently in development, and works with the Moon to Mars team. His primary work supports educators in inspiring the next generation from historically disenfranchised groups, helping create culturally responsive lessons that engage students previously left out of the work that NASA does. He holds degrees from the University of Washington, Georgia College and State University, Macron State College, and BYU. Prior to NASA, Steven worked in K-12 education for 20 years. Steven, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, it's great to be here. That guy sounds awesome. Man, I'm never really sure how to react when people read my bio book. Like, should I look interested, like curious, or I'm not, like, no, stop, I don't.
Who is that person?
Who is that guy? But thank you guys for having me. As you said, my name is Steven Smith. I work at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. We are the home of human spaceflight, but a lot of people don't know we're actually only one of 10 centers across the country. So we're only a small part of the big picture that we do. So it's pretty cool to be here.
So what are the other 10 centers?
So we have obviously Kennedy Space Center, which is where we launched. That's in Florida. In Alabama, we have the Marshall Space Flight Center there, and they're kind of most famous for their space camp that we have there. I actually went to space camp there in 7th grade, and I always warn parents that if you send your kids to space camp, this is what could happen. We have the Stennis Center in Mississippi, where we test a lot of our rocket engines and things like that. Langley in Virginia is where the human computers worked that you saw in Hidden Figures. Then we have Goddard Space Flight Center that does a lot of the satellite work and that sort of thing. Then we have 3 in California. We have the Jet Propulsion Lab, which is down by LA. We have a center up by San Francisco, and then the Armstrong Center up into the desert and mountains is where we do a lot of our aviation work.
Awesome. So tell us more about the Artemis mission. It sounds so exciting.
It is so cool. So I'm going to share with you a little something here. Let me see if I can my screen really quickly. All right. Can everybody see the astronaut?
Yes,
cool.
We can see.
All right. So we have been thinking as people about space and about rockets for a very long time. 2,000 years before Sir Isaac Newton really sat down and codified the laws of motion that we understand now as just for the laws of inertia and all that sort of thing. There was a guy who, his name was Hero of Alexandria, who built an engine that really used the same principles that we use for rockets now. He built up steam inside and allowed the steam to exit through a small port, which of course pushed it around, and it created this little engine thing. And before that, there was a guy named Artemis who designed a pigeon that actually flew on a little string pushed by the gases as well. The Chinese developed fireworks, and from that figured out that if you left one of the ends open, it would move in that direction, the opposite direction. So they used it in wartime with fire arrows, which apparently weren't very accurate, but they were really freaky looking. So all these fire arrows coming at the Mongols, and it just chased them away. Mostly it was a psychological thing. in Europe, we started using things like this for warfare, of course. And then moving on into modern history, where Robert Goddard, who the center in Maryland is named after, in 1926 launched the first multi-stage liquid rocket. Prior to that, it was all gunpowder, so kind of a controlled explosion. And then in World War II, Wernher von Braun worked on the V2 project with the bad guys, and he's purported to have said, when the V2 launched for the first time and hit England, that the launch went perfectly. It just landed on the wrong planet. He was always thinking about spacefaring. And so after the war, he came to work for us and was a huge part of our space program, which started with Mercury. Mercury was NASA really answering the question, can we get to space and live there? We didn't really know. We didn't know if you ate food, could you swallow? We didn't know what the radiation was going to be like. We had a lot of questions. So the Mercury astronauts really answered those initial, can we go? And right after the very first flight with Alan Shepard, that's when President Kennedy at the time went to Rice University and gave that speech where he said, we're going to go to the moon and do the other things, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. We had only been to space once and never orbited when he said, we're going to the moon. And so, of course, NASA's like, whoa, okay. So that was really the start of things for us, and we've been like that ever since. A lot of the projects we have, we use the phrase, we say that it's like building a plane while you're flying it, because we're always on the cutting edge of the things that we're doing. So after we learned that we could go to space and we figured out we were going to the moon, we knew there were things we were going to have to be able to do in space to be successful. So that's the Gemini program. 2 astronauts would launch at a time. We did things like docking two vehicles together, getting out and doing work outside in space, all of those sort of things, and staying for a longer period of time. That taught us what we needed to know to go onto the moon with Apollo. We landed for the first time in 1969, right before 68. I'm sorry, right before the cutoff that Kennedy had given us. And actually, we just lost Michael Collins recently. I don't know if you saw that in the news. He was the command module pilot for that when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong actually went to the surface. We went to the moon over the course of 12 landings, 13 flights. So I'm sorry, that's too many. There are 12 people who have walked on the moon in 6 landings. We did have 7 flights. Of course, Apollo 13 famously didn't land. It went out and came back successfully. That led us in about right after we started that, we started thinking about what was next. And part of that was a shuttle program, a vehicle that could take us to and from outer space in a reusable fashion. So think about it like a pickup truck that's going to go out and do work. And we did that for a long time. The very first launch was in 1981, and we closed down 30 years later in 2011. And you'll notice there, the guy in the orange suit, that's actually John Glenn. So he was the 3rd American in space. He was the first American to orbit. And then in his 70s, he actually went back on the space shuttle for 2 weeks to help us understand what happens in an older person's body when they're in space. And then, of course, Chris McAuliffe, who we lost, unfortunately, with the Challenger, is actually who inspired me to become a teacher. We started the ISS program. In 1998, we had the first components go up. In 2000, we had the first astronauts stay on there. And from that moment, from those first astronauts, they have handed off in such a way that over the course of now 21 years, we have not had a single second where there haven't been human beings living and working in space. Because they trade off. So one is still up there when the other gets there and then they come back. So continuous human habitation of space for the last 21 years. So most of you watching this, there's never been a moment of your life that human beings haven't been literally in space working. And what the astronauts are doing up there, they're not flying the space station. We actually fly it from here in Houston. They're up there doing science. They're learning what happens to the human body. What happens, can you grow plants? They're answering all of those questions for us. We've had 2 American astronauts stay for over a year, or around a year. We had Scott Kelly, and then most recently, Christina Cook, who did that. And you should start seeing more and more of that happening, because we need to know what happens long term, because when we go to Mars, that's a 3-year trip. It takes 6 to 9 months just to get to Mars. Then once you're there, you have to wait 18 months for the planets to realign so you can make the short 6 to 9 month trip back. That's a minimum of about 3 years. And so we need to know what happens over the course of a long trip like that. We now have the Commercial Crew Program, which is taking our astronauts from American soil up to the ISS. It's kind of like our Uber and Lyft, if you will. That has become mission ready. We've got Crew 2 on board now, and we're getting ready to send our third mission crew as our second partner, so that's with SpaceX, our second partner, Boeing, has a Starliner vehicle that's going to be making its second test flight in July, I believe. And so then once we have both of those, the tempo is going to get crazy. We went from having either 3 or 6 astronauts at a time on the space station to at one point having 11. Just having that high tempo of getting people up there. And what that's bringing us up to do is to think long term, to think out into the solar system, or to think the moon again, to think Mars. And to get there, we have this new rocket called the Space Launch System, partnered with the Orion spacecraft. This is the vehicle that's going to take us to the moon and on to Mars and maybe beyond. The astronauts, when they go to Mars, won't be staying in this small Orion craft. They'll be that will dock with a bigger transit vehicle that will allow them to get out and walk around and all that kind of stuff. But the vehicle, the Space Launch System, is the biggest, strongest, fastest thing that human beings have ever built. The Saturn V rocket that you saw with the Apollo missions, the big famous one that you see, rocketing past the thing, that is about the same height as what our first SLS is going to look like, but it weighs 1 million pounds more, because of the types of materials that we had access to compared to what we have now. So our vehicle now is 1 million pounds lighter, but has 1 million pounds more thrust. That's going to allow us to move more objects, heavier objects, farther out into space and do things that we've never even been able to consider before. Just to give you some idea, the space shuttle took 40 trips to get all of the pieces and parts of the ISS into space and put together. The SLS in its cargo configuration could take the volume of 2 International Space Stations in one shot. It is ridiculous how awesome this thing is. We have a team of 18 astronauts that we've put together that are going to be flying these missions. Artemis 3 will be the first one to land. Artemis 2 will take astronauts kind of like Apollo 8 did. They'll take astronauts to the moon and bring them back without landing. They'll do a lot of tests and stuff out there. Artemis 3 will actually land the first woman and the first person of color on the southern pole of the moon. And then from that point on, we're going to have a regular tempo of astronauts going to the moon and staying long term. In Apollo, we stayed for a day or so and we came back. These astronauts will eventually be staying weeks and months at a time, either on the surface of the moon or orbiting in our Gateway platform that's going around there. And there's a really cool YouTube video. If you just look up Meet the Artemis team, it's awesome. And by the way, I can Jessica and Charles, I can make this PowerPoint available to you, so you have all these links and stuff. I'll just shoot it to you.
That would be wonderful.
We're already getting ready for all of this. We have the Artemis astronauts who are working in our neutral buoyancy lab, which is a little swimming pool that is 102 feet across, 202 feet wide, and 40 feet deep. It has 6.9 million gallons of water. It's big enough to contain a full-sized International Space Station mock-up that we use to train the astronauts to work out in space. But we can make their suits using weights and floats weigh whatever we want it to, either 0 or in this case 1/6 of what they would experience, because that's what it is on the moon. And they get to move around and feel what it's like to move in that sort of atmosphere. One of the cool things I want to really share with everybody before I turn it over to questions and answers is we have this really cool thing for educators. And by the way, Boy Scouts people, the den leaders, den moms, all those people you count as educators. This isn't just classroom teachers. We're asking you to help us prepare this Artemis generation of explorers. And so Paige is a really cool opportunity for you. We're asking you to make a video pledge to help us prepare these students for this upcoming exploration. Send us the video and we're going to put it on Artemis 1 and fly it to the moon. So this is your chance to go to the moon. When the video comes back, we'll put it in some kind of traveling exhibit of some sort, but you'll have access to a lot of really cool Artemis specific resources and some really cool events that will be just for our Paige educators. So don't miss this opportunity. It closes in June. There's a great PDF there for you. And I'm most excited about it because I came up with the name, so that's pretty cool. All right, so I'll stop sharing at that point and open it up for questions if you have them.
So we do have some questions. we asked for scouts to send us some questions, and they have sent some wonderful ones. So Cub Scout Austin B asked, what will the astronauts do on the moon? And will there still be the flag Armstrong put on the moon?
Yeah, so the point of us going to the moon this time really is to learn how to be on a planetary body that is not Earth for long periods of time. We're using that as the test bed to learn how to then go on to Mars. We're doing that because, relatively speaking, it's close. We have, it's 238,000 miles, which is a crazy far distance. If you have a quarter, and imagine the quarter is the Earth, that makes the moon about the size of a dime, and you would put that 3 feet from your quarter in order to be in scale. It's a little farther than you think it is. Whenever we draw it, we always draw them right together, but it's actually about 3 feet away. But in that same scale, Mars is like a nickel-ish size that you have to put 500 feet from where you are. That's an entire football field and 2/3 of another football field away from that point. So that's a huge distance. On the moon, if something goes wrong, I can get them more supplies. I can get them home in just a couple of days. The moon is relatively easy to get to, whereas Mars is crazy far away. And in some points, like right now, it's actually, the sun is actually between us and Mars. We can't even send signals to Mars at this point. There are points in our orbits where Mars is so far away that it can take up to 20 minutes just to send a signal, which travels at the speed of light, by the way, 186,000 miles per second. It still takes 20 minutes to get there. So we need to make all the mistakes we're going to make. Notice I didn't say we might make. All the mistakes, because we're going to. Anytime you're innovating, anytime you're creating, anytime you're pushing forward, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. But we want to make them relatively safely while we're here close to the moon. Oh, and the flag. Yes, the flags are still there. All the vehicles are still there that they left there, but the flag would look very different. It actually would still be standing up. Everything's fine because there's not wind blowing it over, but it's been in the sun with no atmosphere to protect it, so it's bleached white.
Okay. What about the golf ball?
It's still there.
Okay. So Scout Christian S asked, at what point would you be able to make the moon a livable satellite or discover what is beneath or under the surface? Will you ever study what is underneath?
That's a great question, Christian. So we are not, so there's multiple kinds of livable. So there's like terraforming, which you see in some video games where they literally make it where there's like trees and air and plants and whatever. That's not something that we're even considering anywhere in the conceivable future. That's just a huge endeavor, and the amount of resources it takes is just it's a lot with our current technology. Now that's not saying that someday all of a sudden this is just going to make sense and be super easy, and we drop a pill on there or something. I don't know, whatever. But having colonies that are big enough for people to live there, that's a possibility. Although again, right now it's not something we're thinking about, having like people just be born and live and die on the moon. There will be astronauts who work there for long periods of time. We're going to be using the moon kind of like a filling station. When we launch the vehicle to Mars, that vehicle won't launch from Earth. It'll launch from cislunar orbit, or orbit around the moon. That way we don't have to overcome that huge gravity pull of the Earth. We're already in space, we're already moving, and it takes much less to just get going in that direction. It's sort of like when you're on the merry-go-round. That first push of your friends is really hard, but once it's moving, now it's a really easier just a tap to kind of keep it going. That's the same sort of thing. So in order to be in orbit, you're moving really fast so that you don't crash land on the thing that's pulling you back. Below the surface, we actually know quite a bit. We've done some cool studies, but we know that the moon is very different than the Earth. So it doesn't have the stratified layers like we do here on Earth. It's a much smaller piece of us. When we went the first time, we did a lot of geological studies and learned that the moon is actually a piece of the outer crust of the Earth that's slung off after a collision and then solidified into what is now the moon. So all the materials that are there are actually the same as Earth because they're from Earth, with the exception of some, of course, comets and meteors that have hit it over time. it's not geologically active. There aren't really underneath spaces. And now there may be like caverns and some things like that, just because of the way things cool. So imagine a piece of lava rock, has lots of little bubbles and stuff in it. And we may think about using some of those. It's in the same on Mars, because we don't have the radiation protection on the moon or Mars that we do here. So going underground may be something we think about for the future, for sure.
Very cool. Our next question, Scout Carter R asked, when will we construct a stage 2 lunar base for astronauts to turn into a self-sustainable stage 3 colony for the same price as the ISS?
There are some pretty specific things there. So I'm not 100% sure what stages of bases there are. I don't know if that's from a game or from a specific challenge or something. But so what I'll say is this: right now, the plan is our base is going to be in orbit. It's called the Gateway, and it's going to be doing this really cool thing called and I'm going to use this big crazy word, and then I'll make it simpler. It's called a near rectilinear halo orbit. All that means is it's almost a rectangle, that it's longer than it is wide. And so you have this long kind of loop out. And then when you come in, you come very close. I'll use my microphone here as the moon. It's even the same color. As you come in, you whip around and use the gravity of the moon to kind of slingshot. So we don't have to use as much fuel because we're getting that little gravity push every time we get close. That's going to be our base. And the reason that we're doing that is because if we build a building on the surface of the moon, we're sort of tied to that building. So we can only go out and explore as far as we can get with resources from that building. With this orbiting platform, we can make adjustments to that orbit and fly over any part of the moon we want. Over the poles, over the equator, over some part in the middle. We can do anything, and then just have a launch vehicle that leaves from the Gateway, lands, and then meets back up with it sometime later. That allows us to explore any part of the moon that we want to. So for right now, that's the plan. And I think moving forward into to Mars, that we're thinking the same sort of thing, to be able to explore the greatest area, to not have a surface colony, if you will, as much as just be able to get to any space we want to do research, to look at things like that.
Thank you. So Cub Scout Christopher N asked, how do you drink water in space?
That's a great question, because fluids act really weird in space. So if you have a cup of coffee or a cup of soda or a cup of water and you turn it up like this to drink it, the water just stays in the cup. Water has two big properties that we talk about, which is adhesion and cohesion. Adhesion means water sticks to other stuff, like your window. When it's raining, you notice the water will stick to the window, but water also sticks to itself. Adhesion, cohesion. And so with no gravity, the water just sticks to the cup and sticks to itself. So you get these blobs of water. So what they do, it's kind of like a Capri Sun. They actually have a bag with a little straw sticking out of it, and it has a one-way valve, and they squeeze the bag, and a literal bubble of water comes out, and they just suck it up.
Thank you. Scout Caitlin Z asked, why did it take so long for a female or a person of color to take a trip to the moon?
That's a brilliant question. And there really isn't a satisfactory answer to that. The Russians put a woman into space in the 1960s. Valentina Tereshkova which by the way is just super fun to say. She was the, I think, 6th or 7th person total into space. The Russians did it very early. We didn't put a woman into space until Sally Ride well into the 1980s during the shuttle program. When we were going to the moon, which was only of that period between 1968 and 1972, so there were really only 4 years that we went to the moon, the astronauts in particular was still very much a boys' club. There's a wonderful movie. It's not a documentary. It's a fictional movie that sort of supposes what would have happened if the Russians had gone to the moon before us. And in that movie, part of that supposition is that we would have put women astronauts very much sooner in order for the publicity of it, to kind of one up the Russians in some way. but it was just the ignorance of people at that time and well into, and unfortunately what you've seen with the Me Too movement, that ignorance exists even today, where women and people of color are undervalued. And but I will say, in NASA's defense, we've caught up, I think, and in some ways past a lot of other organizations. When the tragedy of George Floyd happened, NASA's response was we had these 4 pillars that we build from, of innovation and all these other things. And we added a pillar to everything that we do for diversity and inclusion, to make sure that the people we hire are the best at what they do. And that's it. That we just look for that one qualification. If you're the best at what you do and the best for whatever that job is, then you're the person for that job. Right now, Vanessa Weish is our acting director of Johnson Space Center. She's a female African-American. We have so many astronauts, and I fully believe in my pick, not the NASA pick, this is just Steven's pick, for the first woman on the moon is Jessica Watkins. She's a new astronaut from the 2017 class, and she is a rock star. I'm such a fangirl for her. So we're going to make that right. And moving forward, you will see people who look like you, whatever it is you look like, as we go forward. And we're dedicated to making that. But what the only answer for why we didn't do it before is ignorance.
Well, I'm excited to hear a woman's going to be landing on the moon, but I'm also just really surprised that we have not been back to the moon since the early 70s.
Yeah, that was started with Richard Nixon. Kind of decided that we're just going to save money and we're going to stay in low Earth orbit, and we stuck with that until very recently.
Wow. So Scout Jackson has our last question. Is there a real possibility that we will be able to live on Mars in the next 50 years?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. So if we use the word be able to, I think we might be able to. There may be the technology, there may be that sort of, in order to make that work within the next 50 years. I think you will see human beings put feet on Mars sometime in the late 2030s. So about a decade-ish from now, between 10 and 15 years, we will see boots on the ground. And by the way, if you do the math backwards, that means that astronaut is somewhere between 7 and 16 years old right now. And if that astronaut happens to be listening right now, when you step off of the vehicle after coming back from Mars and you get that first question about what inspired you to space, I just need you to remember the name Steven Smith and say it out loud in the microphone. That's all I need you to do. But whether the question is whether we want to live, like, again, there's a difference between going someplace and working for a period of time and coming home versus going somewhere that we're going to birth children and live and die. Those are two different things. In the first one, absolutely, we're absolutely going to have people who live on Mars. And they're going to have to live there for, again, remember the orbital problem. So they're going to have to live either on the surface or around Mars for a long period of time just to be able to get back safely. But as far as going to stay and like birth children and live their whole lives, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's something we're even going to want to do. It is such a harsh environment. The average temperature on Mars is something in the neighborhood of negative 146 degrees on a beautiful spring day. The radiation is ridiculous. There's 1% of the atmosphere that we have here. So there's almost no radiation protection from that. It doesn't have a magnetic field that we have here, which also protects us from the radiation. It just doesn't have that. You can't breathe outside because there's just not enough. Even if there was oxygen, there's not enough. So there's a difference between being able to do something and is it something we're going to really want to do? And so I don't know but able, yeah, I think we'll have the technology to be able to do it, but that's where we are.
Well, thank you for your time and for answering all of our questions. We were so excited to get to host you. I wish we could just keep talking. I have a whole bunch of questions of my own, but unfortunately we have reached the end of our time.
Well, thank you so much
So-
for having me. It's such an honor to get to do what I do, to talk to the young people and the people who help them. It's a cool thing.
And can we end with a link or just a little bit more information about that peak program? Because I plan
Oh
to
yeah,
be making a video soon.
yeah. So let me see if I can. Yes. So again, it's called Page.
Sorry, Paige.
Yeah, it's Page, and it's let me see if I can find that. Um, I'll grab the link and pop it into the chat, maybe.
We'll also post it on our website.
Very cool.
But we definitely want to challenge our scout leaders out there to try,
Yes.
apply, send in a video, and start inspiring the next generation.
Do it. One of us. One of us.
All right, for those that are watching, we will post this right afterwards. I'll also with some of the links to the videos that were mentioned. And thank you so much for joining us. We've had a wonderful talk with Steven, and thank you from Capital Area Council.
You're very welcome. Thank you.